All right, next up here on Saturday, we've got Clemson and Syracuse. Clemson, 7-point road favorites, 52.5 the total. This is one of my favorite sides for this week in college football. I'm on the home underdog here, Syracuse plus the 7. First of all, you've got Clemson now, second loss, and just a heartbreaking loss. It was a back and forth game, winnable game, the big showdown with Florida State. They led the most of that game. And for Clemson, they're going to feel like they let one get away. They led most of that game. It felt like Florida State was fighting uphill, swimming upstream that entire game. And yet Florida State still snatches victory at the end. And Clemson, look, they couldn't execute on either side of the ball. They couldn't stop Florida State when they needed to stop. Obviously, they had the kicking issues. They had to call in this kicker, former kicker of the team that was actually, now in the business world. And they call him up to be an emergency starting kicker. And as you could see, he was not ready for the big moment there to kick that field goal late in the game for Clemson. And sure enough, that was part of the reason they ended up losing that game. But again, and Cade Klubnik, I thought for a large part of that game against a pretty good Florida State team, he played well. I'll give Cade Klubnik his due. He played a pretty solid game overall. Yeah. But at crunch time, just couldn't make those key plays to win the football game on offense. Those key throws, those key moments where you need your quarterback to come through for you. He couldn't, and Jordan Travis did for the Florida State Seminoles. And that was the difference in the end of that game. And I have to say it, and I'll say it on Twitter. It's time we start giving out roses to Dabo Swinney. That coaching staff was a disaster down the stretch of that game with play calling, with game management, managing the clock. How the hell do you not get off a play late in the fourth quarter before it gets to overtime? That is so bad that they allowed that to happen.
Why did they run the ball on those last 2 plays for 1 yard? I don't know why they're throwing it. Idiots.
I mean, that is so bad. And now this, and I don't like it. I don't like the hires he's made at coordinator these last few years. Ever since Venables left, this has been not a sinking ship, but these coordinators have not impressed me offensively or defensively for Clemson. So you got to wonder how, Dabo's still getting the talent, but we're seeing some problems with him in terms of, adjustments. We're seeing problems with him managing the clock, managing the game. Play calling's an issue on both sides of the ball. What the hell was that on the fourth down play to try to stay alive in overtime of that game against Florida State? I mean, just disappointing. And it's gotten worse. And you had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence to bail you out with some of these, coordinator and coaching issues and game management issues. You don't have that anymore. And it's kind of exposing Clemson a little bit. They're still a very good team, but elite not this year. I'm not saying they can't get back there next year, 2 years from now, but it's not an elite Clemson team this year. It's not. And it certainly wasn't last year either. I worry about the mindset after a crushing loss like this. Now they're 2 losses this season, both ACC losses as well. Keep that in mind. So all of a sudden they're out of the championship picture. They're going to be in an uphill battle to be in the ACC championship game. All of a sudden you're looking at a much more minor bowl game potentially for Clemson this year than they're used to. And I know that's something that's got to stick in their minds. Like, we're going to be busting our ass the rest of the season for a more minor bowl game. That's not the Clemson way of the last decade. We're winning this conference. We're owning this conference. We're in the championship picture. We're in the playoff. Not this year. Playoff, no. Maybe ACC championship, no. I worry about this team's psyche now. Going on the road, a tough loss like that last week, and facing a Syracuse team that, to me, has done nothing wrong this year. They've looked very good. I love Schrader at quarterback. They struggled early in that game, but, man, whatever was said in the second half or whatever adjustments they made, because they did have a sluggish first half against Army, man, they came alive, and it was bing, bang, boom. Every time they had the ball, it felt like they scored in the second half against Army. That's what that offense is very capable of. They'll be fired up, even with Clemson showing some warts this year and some chinks in the armor. Syracuse is still going to be amped up to host Clemson in this game. And look, there's been better Clemson teams and there's been worse Syracuse teams where Syracuse has still given Clemson a tough game. Look at the recent head-to-head series. I mean, 6-point game last year at Clemson, Syracuse covers. 3-point win for Syracuse, or for Clemson at Syracuse 2 years ago, Syracuse covers. They have really, and especially the last 2 years, we've seen a 6-point and a 3-point game down to the wire. Too many points especially in this dubious spot for Clemson here. What do you think here, Conor?
Yeah, I agree. It's been their problem. They've had a few like blowouts in the mix there in the 10 years, but even when they were really good and Syracuse was down, this is a trouble game for Clemson. Yeah, the play calling was just not good in that second half, and it just seemed like they finally kind of are losing these games. Clemson in the past would win those tight games, and they didn't against Florida State. And shout out to Florida State, still undefeated. But yeah, I think this is a kind of a bad matchup. Clemson's still a Shipley. They have some good dynamic. Their tight ends are good. Their receivers, so they should be able to move the ball. But Syracuse here at home with Schrader, and they were asleep. I was like, "What's going on with Syracuse?" That first half, that first quarter. But you just said it. They woke up. I think they'll be able to move the ball. This is too many points at home. I agree with you here. Give me Syracuse.
Well, and they've got issues on the offense too, because you mentioned it. I like Shipley at running back, and I like Jake Brenningstool. He's a really good tight end for Clemson, big guy. But the receiving core is down this year, and the guys that they count on, both of them may not play. Cole Turner's out for the season. That was a huge injury. That they suffered a couple weeks ago against Florida Atlantic. Antonio Williams for Clemson as well, day-to-day ankle injury, suffered as well. Keep that in mind. Also, Tyler Brown, who actually stepped up, Bo Collins, some of these guys that stepped up for them, they got banged up a little bit in that Florida State game as well. It was a physical game. So I worry about that here for Clemson going to Syracuse. Keep an eye on that receiving core, which, again, has been a little bit of the it's not as great a receiving core as sometimes we've seen out of Clemson in years